Amina was 10 years old when she first understood that life doesn't always go the way you plan it. She lived in a small neighborhood where houses were packed close together, where you could hear your neighbors' conversations through thin walls, and where everyone knew everyone else's business. Her home was a single room that somehow had to fit her mother, her two younger brothers, and herself. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Every morning started the same way. The sound of the morning prayer would drift through the window, and Amina would open her eyes while it was still dark outside. She'd carefully fold her thin mattress and place it in the corner so there would be space for everyone to move around. Her mother would already be awake, preparing tea on their small stove, the sweet smell of cardamom filling their tiny space. Amina would wash her face with cold water from the bucket near the door, then put on her school uniform. The uniform had once been crisp and new, a deep navy blue with a white collar. But that was 2 years ago when her father was still alive. Now the fabric was faded from too many washes, and the hem of the skirt barely reached her knees anymore. She'd grown taller, but there was no money for a new uniform. The walk to school took 40 minutes. Amina didn't mind it, even when the sun beat down hard or when the monsoon rains turned the unpaved roads into rivers of mud. She'd walk with her worn-out school bag on her shoulder, stepping carefully around puddles, saying good morning to the shopkeepers who were opening their stores, waving at the old man who sold newspapers at the corner. School was Amina's favorite place in the whole world. The moment she stepped through those gates, she felt different. It didn't matter that her uniform was old or that she couldn't afford the fancy pencil boxes the other girls had. In the classroom, when she raised her hand to answer a question, she was just as good as anyone else. Sometimes she was even better. Her teacher, Mrs. Rashida, often praised her. "Amina has a gift for numbers," she would say, holding up Amina's math notebook for the class to see. Look at how neatly she solved these problems. Those moments made Amina's heart swell with pride. She dreamed of becoming a teacher herself one day, of standing in front of a classroom and helping children learn the way Mrs. Rashida helped her. But dreams need more than hope to survive. They need money, and money was something Amina's family didn't have. Her father had died 2 years earlier. Amina still remembered the day clearly, even though she tried not to think about it. He'd been sick for weeks, coughing so badly that the neighbors could hear it. Her mother had taken him to the free clinic, but the doctor there said he needed tests, medicines, maybe even the big hospital in the city. All of that cost money they didn't have. Her mother had borrowed from relatives, sold her few pieces of jewelry, even skipped meals to save money for his treatment. But it wasn't enough. One morning, her father simply didn't wake up. After that, everything changed. Her mother started working as a housemaid in 3 different homes, leaving before sunrise and coming back after dark. Her hands became rough from washing dishes and scrubbing floors. She'd come home exhausted, her feet swollen, but she never complained. She'd just smile at her children and ask about their day. Amina tried to help as much as she could. She'd take care of her younger brothers, making sure they ate and did their homework. She'd cook simple meals, wash clothes, and keep their small room clean. But the one thing she couldn't help with was money. No matter how hard her mother worked, there was never enough. They had to pay rent, buy food, keep the electricity connection running. Every rupee was counted and stretched as far as it could go. Still, education was important to her mother. "You must study," she'd tell Amina, holding her face gently in her tired hands. "It's the only way out of this life. Promise me you'll never stop going to school." And Amina would promise, not knowing that keeping that promise would soon become the hardest thing she'd ever done. September came with its own kind of trouble. The new school term was starting, and the principal made an announcement that sent waves of worry through many families. The school fees were increasing. It wasn't much by some standards, but for families like Amina's, it might as well have been a mountain of gold. Students who didn't pay their fees by the end of the month wouldn't be allowed to sit for the exams. No exams meant no promotion to the next grade. And if you couldn't move to the next grade, you'd have to repeat the entire year or drop out altogether. Amina went home that day with a heavy feeling in her chest. She clutched the fee notice in her hand, the paper seeming to grow heavier with each step. When she reached home, her mother was already there, sitting on the floor and counting coins from her purse. Amina watched her for a moment, saw the worry lines on her forehead, the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Ami," Amina said softly, holding out the paper. Her mother took it, read it slowly, and then closed her eyes. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Give me some time, Beta. I'll figure something out." But Amina knew there was nothing to figure out. There was no money. Her mother was already working herself to the bone. They were already eating less, wearing old clothes, living in one room. What more could they possibly cut back on? That night, Amina lay on her thin mattress and stared at the ceiling. She could hear her mother crying softly in the corner, trying to muffle the sound so the children wouldn't hear. She could hear her younger brothers breathing peacefully in their sleep, unaware of the problems weighing down on their small family. And in that moment, Amina made a decision. She didn't know exactly what she would do yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let her mother carry this burden alone. She wasn't going to give up on school, on her dreams, on the future she'd promised her father she would build. Somehow, some way, she would find a solution, even if she had to do it herself. The next morning, Amina got dressed in her school uniform like always. She picked up her bag, told her mother she was leaving for school, and walked out the door. But she didn't go to school. Instead, she walked to the banyan tree near the marketplace and sat down beneath its thick, spreading branches. She couldn't face going to school without the fee payment. The teachers would ask about it. They'd send her to the office. The office would call her mother, and her mother would cry again, feeling like she'd failed her daughter. Amina couldn't bear the thought of putting her through that, so she sat under the tree and watched the world go by. She watched shopkeepers opening their stores, pulling up metal shutters with loud clanging sounds. She watched women in colorful saris walking to the market with cloth bags. She watched school children in neat uniforms laughing and chatting as they passed by. And each time she saw them, her heart ached a little more. What was she going to do? She couldn't hide forever. Her mother would find out eventually. And even if she somehow managed to keep this secret, what about her education? What about her dreams of becoming a teacher? Were they just going to disappear because of something as simple as money? She stayed under that tree all day, and when it was time for school to end, she walked back home. Her mother asked about her day, and Amina lied with a smile on her face. "It was good, Ami. We learned about fractions today. The second day was harder. The third day was even worse. Sitting under that tree, watching life move forward while hers stood still, was eating her up inside. And the lying, the constant lying to her mother, made her feel sick to her stomach. On the fourth morning, something shifted inside Amina. She couldn't just sit and wait for a miracle. She had to do something, anything. She thought about the flower sellers she saw every day near the bus station. Young women and old ladies sitting with baskets of jasmine, roses, and marigolds calling out to passers-by. They made money. Not much, probably, but something. The idea scared her. She was just a kid. She'd never sold anything in her life. But what other choice did she have? At least she'd be trying. At least she'd be doing something instead of just sitting under a tree feeling sorry for herself. She went home while her mother was at work and found her old dupatta, a simple cotton one with faded flowers printed on it. Then she broke open her piggy bank, a clay pot she'd been saving coins in for over a year. There wasn't much inside, just small coins she'd kept from her lunch money or found on the street. But it was enough to start. The flower market opened before dawn. Amina had never been there that early, and the darkness scared her a little, but she walked fast, keeping her head down until she reached the market. The place was already alive with activity. Vendors were unloading baskets of flowers from trucks, the sweet smell of jasmine mixing with the earthy scent of marigolds and roses. She approached a woman who was arranging flowers into neat bundles. "Auntie, can I buy some flowers?" she asked, her voice small. The woman looked at her with curious eyes. "Bit early for a schoolgirl to be buying flowers, isn't it?" "I need them for a prayer at home," Amina lied quickly. The woman studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "How much money do you have?" Amina showed her the coins in her palm. The woman counted them and made a small bundle of jasmine and marigolds, tied with a simple string. "This is all you'll get for this amount, Beta. These flowers are expensive." Amina took the bundle carefully, thanked the woman, and headed to the bus station. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. She stood at the corner where she'd seen other flower sellers, spread her dupatta on the ground, and arranged her flowers on it. Then came the hardest part. Actually selling them, Flowers, she called out, but her voice came out like a whisper. No one even looked at her. She tried again, a little louder this time. Fresh flowers, jasmine, marigolds. A woman walked past, glanced at her, and kept walking. A man in a business suit rushed by without even noticing her. A group of college students laughed and chatted, completely absorbed in their own world. For an hour, Amina stood there, calling out to strangers, and not a single person stopped. Her throat started to hurt. Her legs ached from standing. The morning sun was getting hotter and sweat dripped down her back. Finally, an elderly woman approached her. She bent down, picked up a string of jasmine, smelled it, and smiled. "How much, Betty?" Amina named a price, the same price she'd heard other vendors call out. The woman nodded, pulled out a coin from her purse, and handed it to Amina. Just like that, she'd made her first sale. It wasn't much. After buying more flowers for the next day, she'd barely have anything left. But it was something. It was a start. The days that followed were the hardest of Amina's life. She'd wake up before sunrise, go to the flower market, buy a small bundle with whatever money she'd made the day before, and then spend hours standing in the heat trying to sell them. Some days were better than others. Some days people would buy. Other days she'd stand for hours and sell nothing, watching her flowers wilt in the heat, knowing she'd lost the little money she'd invested. The worst part wasn't the heat or the tired feet or even the hunger. It was the way some people treated her. Some would look right through her as if she didn't exist. Others would wave her away like she was a fly buzzing around their food. A few men would try to bargain her down to almost nothing, knowing she was desperate to sell. One afternoon, a group of boys her age walked by. They were in school uniforms, clean and pressed, with fancy school bags on their backs. One of them pointed at her and laughed. "Look, there's our classmate Amina. Aren't you supposed to be in school, or did you decide you'd rather sell flowers?" His friends joined in the laughter. Amina felt her face burn with shame. She wanted to run away, to hide, to disappear, but she stood there frozen as they walked away, still laughing. That night she cried for the first time since starting to sell flowers. Not because of the boys or the heat or the rejections, but because she missed school so much it hurt. She missed learning, missed her teacher's praise, missed the feeling of solving a difficult math problem and getting it right. Her mother found her crying. Amina had been so careful to hide what she was doing, always making sure to come home after her mother left for work and before she returned. But that day her mother had come home early. "Amina, what's wrong?" her mother asked, rushing to her side. "Why are you crying? Why are you not in your school clothes?" The truth came spilling out. Everything. The unpaid fees, the hiding under the tree, the flower selling, all of it. Her mother listened in silence, and when Amina finished, her mother pulled her into a tight hug and started crying too. "Why didn't you tell me?" her mother sobbed. "You're just a child. You shouldn't have to do this." "You were already so worried, Ami," Amina whispered. "I wanted to help. I wanted to fix it myself." Her mother held her tighter. "You're my brave girl. My strong, brave girl. But you don't have to carry this alone." They sat together for a long time, holding each other, both knowing that despite all the love between them, the problem hadn't gone away. They still needed money. Amina still couldn't go to school, and no amount of tears would change that reality. But something did change that night. Amina wasn't alone anymore. Her mother knew, and somehow that made the burden feel just a little bit lighter. After that night, Amina's mother agreed to let her continue selling flowers, but only in the evenings after her mother came home from work. "You'll go to school during the day," her mother insisted. "I don't care if they send you out of class. At least you'll be there, learning what you can. Education is not something we give up on." So that's what Amina did. She'd go to school, sit in the back of the classroom when the teacher talked about the unpaid fees, and absorb every lesson like a sponge. Then in the evening, she'd rush to the flower market, buy her small bundle, and head to the shopping area where families came to walk around after dinner. The evening crowd was different from the morning rush. People were more relaxed, in better moods. Couples would buy jasmine strings for the women's hair. Mothers would buy small bunches to place at their home prayer altars. The sales were better, but still the money came slowly. After buying flowers for the next day, Amina would carefully place the leftover coins in a small cloth pouch she kept hidden in her school bag. Every night, she'd count them by the light of their single bulb. 10 rupees, 15 rupees, 20. The numbers grew slowly, painfully slowly, but they grew. She calculated constantly in her head. At this rate, how many more weeks until she had enough for the fees? Could she make it before the deadline? One particularly humid evening, Amina stood outside a new shopping plaza that had opened recently. The building had shiny glass doors and bright lights, and well-dressed people walked in and out carrying shopping bags. She felt out of place there with her worn clothes and small basket of flowers, but she'd heard from other vendors that people here spent money more freely. She positioned herself near the entrance, not too close to bother anyone, but close enough to be seen. She called out her usual line, fresh flowers, jasmine, and marigolds, but most people walked past without even glancing her way. An hour passed. The evening was getting late, and her flowers were starting to close up from the heat. She was about to give up and head home when a woman stopped in front of her. The woman was different from most people Amina approached. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was actually looking at Amina, really looking at her face, with eyes that seemed to see more than just a flower seller. "These are beautiful," the woman said, picking up a string of jasmine and examining it carefully. She was wearing a nice salwar kameez, simple but well-made, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. "Thank you, Auntie," Amina replied politely. "What's your name?" the woman asked. "Amina." "And how old are you, Amina?" 10, Auntie." The woman's expression shifted slightly. 10, she repeated softly. "Shouldn't you be at home at this hour? Doing homework, maybe?" Amina felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She didn't like these questions. They made her feel ashamed, exposed. "I finished my homework," she lied. The woman nodded slowly, then asked the question Amina had been dreading. "Why aren't you in school during the day? Why are you selling flowers?" Something about the way she asked, gentle but genuinely curious, made Amina's defenses crumble. Maybe it was because she'd been holding everything inside for so long. Maybe it was because she was tired, so tired of pretending everything was fine. Or maybe it was because this woman's eyes held kindness instead of pity or judgment. The whole story came out. Her father's death, her mother working 3 jobs, the school fees that kept rising while their income stayed the same. The choice between eating and learning. The weeks of selling flowers, counting coins, hoping she could make enough before the deadline. The woman listened to every word without interrupting. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look away. She just listened, and when Amina finished, there were tears in the woman's eyes. "Wait here," the woman said firmly. "Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back." Before Amina could respond, the woman turned and walked quickly into the shopping plaza. Amina stood there, confused and a little worried. Had she said something wrong? Was the woman going to call someone? Should she leave? But something made her stay. Maybe it was the look in the woman's eyes. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Whatever it was, Amina stayed rooted to her spot, her basket of wilting flowers at her feet. 15 minutes passed. The sky was getting darker. Just when Amina was about to give up and go home, the woman emerged from the plaza. But she wasn't alone. Behind her came a small group of people. A young couple holding hands. An elderly man with a walking stick. A woman in office clothes. 2 teenagers. A shopkeeper still wearing his store apron. Amina's heart started racing. What was happening? The woman came straight to her. "Amina," she said, "I want you to tell these people what you told me. About your school fees. About why you're here selling flowers." Amina's mouth went dry. She looked at all these strangers staring at her, waiting. Her hands started shaking. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. She was used to being invisible, ignored. "It's okay," the woman encouraged gently. "Just tell them. Be honest." So Amina told her story again. This time her voice shook. This time she had to stop a few times to take deep breaths. But she told them everything. About her dreams of becoming a teacher. About her mother's rough hands from scrubbing floors. About counting coins every night and wondering if she'd ever have enough. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the woman reached into her purse and pulled out some bills. "This is for your school fees," she said simply. Before Amina could react, the young couple stepped forward. "We want to help too," the young man said, pulling out his wallet. One by one, each person came forward. The elderly man with the walking stick gave what he had in his pocket. The office woman handed over a folded bill. The teenagers pulled their money together. Even the shopkeeper, who said he didn't have much, contributed what he could. Amina stood there in shock as money piled up in her hands. More money than she'd made in all her weeks of selling flowers combined. More money than she'd ever held in her entire life. I don't understand, she stammered, tears streaming down her face. Why are you all doing this? The woman who had started it all knelt down so she was at eye level with Amina. Because you deserve to be in school. Because you're brave. Because your dreams matter. And because sometimes we all need a little help. She took Amina's mother's phone number, which Amina recited in a daze. I'm going to make some calls, the woman said. There are organizations that help children like you. I know some people. This isn't over yet. We're going to make sure you can stay in school. Not just this term, but for all the terms to come. The woman's name was Khalida. Amina learned. Mrs. Khalida. She worked as a manager in one of the offices nearby. She had a daughter about Amina's age, which is why she said she couldn't just walk past. When I saw you standing there, Mrs. Khalida explained, I thought, what if that was my daughter? What if she was forced to sell flowers instead of studying? I couldn't just buy some jasmine and walk away. I had to do something. As the small crowd began to disperse, each person offered Amina words of encouragement. Study hard, they said. Make us proud. Don't give up on your dreams. These strangers, who owed her nothing, who would probably never see her again, had changed her life in 15 minutes. That night, Amina ran home faster than she'd ever run before. She burst through the door, breathless and crying, holding the money in her trembling hands. Ami, she called out. Ami, look. Her mother emerged from the corner where she'd been preparing dinner. When she saw the money, her legs seemed to give out. She sank to the floor and Amina sank with her, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. How? Her mother kept asking. How did this happen? Amina told her about Mrs. Khalida, about the strangers, about the kindness that had appeared out of nowhere when she'd almost given up hope. Her mother held her tight and whispered prayers of gratitude. For the first time in weeks, Amina went to sleep without the weight of worry pressing down on her chest. She dreamed that night not of flower markets and counting coins, but of classrooms and textbooks and a future that suddenly seemed possible again. 3 days after that evening at the shopping plaza, Mrs. Khalida came to Amina's home. She'd called ahead, so Amina's mother had cleaned their small room as best as she could, though there wasn't much that could be done to make it look bigger or less worn. When Mrs. Khalida arrived, she didn't seem to notice or care about the peeling paint or the thin curtain that separated their sleeping area from the rest of the space. She smiled warmly and sat down on the floor with them as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I have good news, she said, pulling out some papers from her bag. I spoke to the director of a charity organization called Hope Foundation. They work specifically with children from families facing financial hardship. I told them about Amina, about her situation, about how hard she's been working. Amina's mother leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. They've agreed to sponsor Amina's education for the entire year, Mrs. Khalida continued. School fees, books, uniform, everything. And if she maintains good grades, which I have no doubt she will, they'll continue the sponsorship for the following years too. The words hung in the air for a moment before their meaning fully sank in. Amina's mother covered her face with her hands and started crying. Not the quiet, tired crying Amina had heard so many nights before, but deep, relieved sobs that seemed to come from somewhere very deep inside. Amina felt like she was floating. The entire year? Not just this term, but the whole year? And possibly beyond that? It seemed too good to be true, like something from one of the stories she read in her library books. There's more, Mrs. Khalida said gently. I also spoke to Mr. Ahmed, who owns the grocery store near the market. His wife has been unwell, and he needs someone reliable to help manage the store in the afternoons. It's not heavy work, mostly handling the counter, keeping track of inventory. The pay is better than housemaid work and the hours are fixed. I mentioned your situation to him and he'd like to meet with you if you're interested. Amina's mother looked up, her face a mixture of disbelief and hope. He would hire me? Even though I have no experience with shop work? He said he'd rather have someone honest and hardworking than someone with experience but no integrity. I told him you're both. Was I wrong? No, you weren't wrong, Amina's mother said quickly. I would work very hard. I promise, Mrs. Khalida smiled. I know you would. That's why I recommended you. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Amina's mother met with Mr. Ahmed and got the job, just as Mrs. Khalida had promised. The hours were better. The work was less physically demanding than scrubbing floors, and the pay was enough that she could quit 2 of her 3 housemaid positions. For the first time in 2 years, she could come home while it was still light outside. The Hope Foundation sent someone to their home to complete the paperwork. A kind woman named Fatima explained that the organization helped about 50 children across the city. "We believe every child deserves a chance to learn," she said to Amina. "All we ask is that you study hard and never take this opportunity for granted." "I won't," Amina promised solemnly. "I'll make you proud. I'll make everyone proud." True to their word, the foundation covered everything. They paid the overdue school fees directly to the school. They provided money for new uniforms, and Amina's mother took her to the tailor to get measured for the first time in years. They gave a stipend for books and supplies. They even included a small amount for lunch money so Amina wouldn't have to skip meals to save coins. The Monday morning when Amina returned to school with her fees paid, she felt like she was walking on air. She wore her new uniform, perfectly fitted and a deep, beautiful navy blue. She carried new notebooks and pens in her bag. But more than all of that, she carried hope. When she walked through the school gates, some of the other students stared. They'd noticed her absence, noticed her struggle. The boys who had laughed at her for selling flowers fell silent when they saw her. Amina held her head high and walked past them without a word. Mrs. Rashida, her teacher, was writing on the blackboard when Amina entered the classroom. She turned, saw Amina, and her face broke into the biggest smile. "Amina, welcome back," she said warmly. "Class, let's give Amina a round of applause for her return." The classroom erupted in claps. Some of the applause was polite, some was genuine. But to Amina, every single clap sounded like a celebration. She took her seat, pulled out her new notebook, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Mrs. Rashida had saved all the lesson notes from the classes Amina had missed. "You'll need to catch up," she said, handing Amina a stack of papers. "But I know you can do it. You're one of my best students." Amina studied harder than she'd ever studied before. Every evening after school, she'd sit with her books while her mother worked at Mr. Ahmed's store. She'd complete her homework, then go through the missed lessons, teaching herself what she'd been absent for. Her younger brothers learned to stay quiet during her study time. Sensing somehow that this was important, Mrs. Khalida visited occasionally, always bringing encouragement and sometimes small treats for the family. "How are your studies going?" she'd ask, and Amina would excitedly tell her about what she was learning. "I knew you had it in you," Mrs. Khalida would say. "You know why I helped you that day? It wasn't just because I felt sorry for you. It was because I saw something special. You didn't give up. When life got hard, you didn't just accept it and quit. You found a way to fight. That's rare, especially in someone so young." When exam time came, Amina was nervous but prepared. She'd covered all the material, understood all the concepts. The math problems that had once seemed impossible now made perfect sense. The reading comprehension passages were easy for someone who'd learned to read between the lines of life itself. The day the results were announced, the entire school gathered in the assembly hall. The principal read out the names of the top students in each grade. When he reached 5th grade, he paused for dramatic effect. In 3rd place, with excellent marks in all subjects, Amina Khalid. Amina felt her heart leap into her throat. 3rd place? Out of the entire grade? She walked up to the stage on shaky legs while the audience applauded. The principal handed her a certificate and a medal, shaking her hand firmly. "Well done," he said. "Your teachers tell me you've overcome significant challenges this year. This achievement is particularly commendable." When she returned to her seat, clutching her certificate and medal, Amina felt tears prick her eyes. These weren't tears of sadness or frustration like the ones she'd cried under the banyan tree. These were tears of joy, of pride, of knowing that every hard moment had been worth it. After the assembly, Mrs. Rashida called Amina aside. "I want you to know something," her teacher said. "I've been teaching for 15 years and I've seen many students come and go, but I've rarely seen determination like yours. You faced obstacles that would have made most people give up and you kept going. That quality, that refusal to quit will take you far in life." That evening, Amina ran all the way to Mr. Ahmed's store where her mother worked. She burst through the door, waving her certificate in the air. Ami, look! I came 3rd in the whole grade." Her mother dropped the package she was wrapping and rushed around the counter. She hugged Amina so tight that she could barely breathe. rocking her back and forth and laughing and crying at the same time. Mr. Ahmed, who'd been watching with a smile, closed the store early that day. "Go home and celebrate," he told Amina's mother. "This is a big day for your family." They stopped by Mrs. Khalida's office on the way home. When Mrs. Khalida saw the certificate and medal, she insisted on taking them out for ice cream, something Amina and her brothers hadn't had in years. They sat in a small dessert shop, sticky and happy, and for the first time since her father died, Amina felt like her family was whole again. Not because their problems had disappeared, but because they'd learned they didn't have to face those problems alone. That night, Amina carefully placed her certificate and medal on the small shelf in their room, right next to the faded photograph of her father. "I did it, Papa," she whispered. "I kept my promise. I didn't give up." And somewhere in the darkness of their small room, surrounded by her sleeping brothers and her exhausted but smiling mother, Amina fell asleep knowing that she'd fought the hardest battle of her young life and won. Years passed, but Amina never forgot those weeks when she stood at the shopping plaza selling flowers, wondering if she'd ever make it back to school. Even as life got better, even as she grew older and moved up through the grades, that memory stayed with her like a scar that had healed, but still showed. She kept her promise to the Hope Foundation. She studied hard every single year, maintaining grades that made her teachers proud and earned her continued sponsorship. She kept her promise to Mrs. Khalida, who remained a constant presence in her life, checking in on her progress and celebrating her achievements as if Amina were her own daughter. And she kept her promise to herself, the one she'd made under that banyan tree when everything seemed impossible. High school came with its own challenges. The schoolwork was harder, the competition fiercer. There were times when Amina wanted to give up, when algebraic equations made her head hurt or when chemistry formulas seemed to swim before her eyes. But during those moments, she'd remember standing in the heat with wilting flowers, being ignored by dozens of people, feeling invisible and worthless. If she could survive that, she could survive anything. Her mother's situation improved gradually too. Mr. Ahmed came to rely on her so much that he eventually made her the store manager, with a salary that allowed them to move to a slightly bigger place, 2 rooms instead of 1. It wasn't much by most standards, but to them, it felt like a palace. Her brothers got to have their own sleeping area, and Amina finally had a small corner with a desk where she could study properly. Mrs. Khalida helped Amina apply for scholarships when the time came for college. "You have an incredible story," she told Amina. "But more than that, you have incredible grades and character to back it up. Any university would be lucky to have you." Amina got accepted to the state university to study education. She was going to become a teacher, just like she'd dreamed all those years ago. The scholarship covered most of her expenses, and she worked part-time at a tutoring center to cover the rest. She refused to let her mother support her financially anymore. "You've done enough, Ami," she'd say whenever her mother tried to give her money. "It's my turn to take care of things now." University opened up a whole new world. Amina met people from different backgrounds, learned about teaching methods and child psychology, and did practice teaching sessions at local schools. Every time she stood in front of a classroom of students, even if it was just for practice, she felt a sense of rightness, of purpose. But she never forgot where she came from. During her second year of university, Amina started volunteering with the Hope Foundation, the same organization that had sponsored her education. She helped identify other children who needed support, visited their families, and told them her story to give them hope. "I was exactly where you are," she'd tell these children and their parents. "I know how impossible it seems, but it's not impossible. With help and determination, you can make it through." She saw herself in every struggling child she met. The girl who walked to school in oversized clothes because her family couldn't afford new ones. The boy who fell asleep in class because he'd been working late helping his father. The teenager who wanted to drop out to help support the family. To each of them, Amina was living proof that circumstances don't have to define destiny. One afternoon, while volunteering at a Hope Foundation event, Amina saw Mrs. Khalida across the room. They'd stayed in touch all these years, but both had been busy with their lives. Mrs. Khalida's hair had more gray in it now, and Amina was no longer the small 10-year-old with wilting flowers. They hugged for a long time. "Look at you," Mrs. Khalida said, holding Amina at arm's length. a university student studying to become a teacher. I'm so proud of you. I wouldn't be here without you, Amina said, her voice thick with emotion. You changed my entire life that day. Mrs. Khalida shook her head. No, Beta. I just gave you a chance. You changed your own life with your courage and hard work. I just helped open a door that you were already trying so hard to get through. Why did you do it? Amina asked, a question that had lingered in her mind for years. You didn't know me. You could have just bought flowers and walked away like everyone else did. Mrs. Khalida was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city beyond. You know, I used to walk past people in need all the time, she finally said. I'd see beggars, see struggling families, see children in difficult situations, and I'd think, someone should help them. But I never stopped. I always had somewhere to be, something to do. I'd donated money to charities, told myself that was enough. She turned back to Amina. But that day when I saw you standing there with your flowers, something shifted. Maybe it was because you reminded me of my daughter. Maybe it was because I could see you were trying so hard to help yourself. Or maybe it was just that the universe put you in my path at exactly the right moment. Whatever it was, I couldn't just walk away. I realized that someone should help meant me. I should help. So I did. And you changed everything, Amina said softly. We changed everything, Mrs. Khalida corrected. You, me, those strangers who contributed that day, the Hope Foundation, your mother who worked so hard, your teachers who believed in you. Change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because people choose to see each other, really see each other, and choose to act. After graduating from university, Amina got a job at a government school in a neighborhood very similar to the one where she grew up. The building was old, the resources limited, but the children were eager to learn. She saw so much of her younger self in them. On her first day, standing in front of her very own classroom, Amina felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She'd done it. Against all odds, through all the struggles, she'd achieved her dream. She was a teacher, but she didn't just want to teach. She wanted to be the kind of teacher who noticed things, who saw beyond the clean uniform or the completed homework to the child struggling underneath, who understood that sometimes the quietest student was fighting the hardest battles. In her second week, she noticed a girl named Zainab who always sat in the back. Her uniform was too small, her notebook was nearly full because she couldn't afford a new one, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she wasn't sleeping enough. The other teachers didn't seem to notice, but Amina did. She called Zainab aside after class one day. Is everything okay at home? She asked gently. Zainab's eyes filled with tears, and slowly the story came out. Her father was sick. Her mother worked long hours. The family was struggling to make ends meet. School fees were coming due, and Zainab didn't know how they'd pay. Amina listened to every word, seeing her own story reflected back at her. When Zainab finished, Amina said, I'm going to help you. We're going to figure this out together. She contacted the Hope Foundation on Zainab's behalf. She spoke to the principal about fee assistance. She gave Zainab her own old textbooks and notebooks. And most importantly, she made sure Zainab knew that someone saw her, someone cared, and someone believed in her potential. Over the years, Amina helped many students like Zainab. Some needed financial support, others needed emotional support, and some just needed someone to believe in them when they'd stopped believing in themselves. She became known in the school as the teacher who went above and beyond, who stayed late to help struggling students, who never gave up on anyone. Her mother, now working comfortably at Mr. Ahmed's store and with both sons in school, would sometimes ask, Don't you get tired? You work so hard for these children. I do get tired, Amina would admit. But then I remember being 10 years old, selling flowers, feeling invisible. And I remember Mrs. Khalida really stopping to see me. How can I not do the same for others? 20 years after that day at the shopping plaza, Amina stood at an award ceremony organized by the education department. She was receiving recognition for her years of service and her impact on students' lives. As she walked up to receive the award, she looked out at the audience and saw faces that told the story of her life. Her mother, older now but smiling with pride. Her brothers, both educated and working good jobs. Mrs. Khalida, hair completely gray but eyes still kind. Fatima from the Hope Foundation. Her former teacher, Mrs. Rashida, retired but still supporting her students. And scattered throughout the audience, former students she'd helped over the years, some now teachers themselves, others in various professions, all there to support the woman who'd supported them. In her acceptance speech, Amina didn't talk about her achievements or awards. Instead, she told her story. She told them about being a 10-year-old flower seller who thought her dreams were dying. She told them about the stranger who stopped when everyone else kept walking. She told them about learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply notice someone who's struggling and choose to help. We all have the power to change lives, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet room, not with grand gestures or huge amounts of money, though those help too, but with simple acts of seeing, caring, and acting. Mrs. Khalida didn't change my life because she was rich or powerful. She changed it because she chose to stop, to listen, and to care. That choice created ripples that are still spreading today, touching every student I teach, every child I help. She looked directly at Mrs. Khalida, who was wiping tears from her eyes. You taught me that one person can make a difference, and I've spent my life trying to be that person for others, the way you were for me. After the ceremony, Amina stood surrounded by people, accepting congratulations and hugs. But in a quiet moment, she stepped outside into the evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the city, a young girl was probably struggling with problems that seemed insurmountable. Somewhere a child was wondering if their dreams would ever come true. Somewhere a family was making impossible choices between basic needs and education. Amina couldn't help everyone. She knew that. But she could help some. And those she helped could help others. And those others could help more. Like ripples in water spreading outward, touching more lives than any one person could ever imagine. She thought about that 10-year-old girl with the wilting flowers, scared and desperate and so close to giving up. She wished she could go back and tell that little girl that everything would be okay, that help was coming, that she'd not only survive, but thrive. But she couldn't go back. None of us can. All we can do is move forward, carrying our stories with us, letting them shape us into people who notice others' struggles because we've struggled ourselves. People who stop when others keep walking. People who choose compassion over indifference. That evening, Amina went home to her small but comfortable apartment. She made tea, sat by the window, and looked out at the neighborhood where she now lived and worked. Tomorrow, she'd be back in the classroom, teaching math and science and reading. But more importantly, she'd be teaching resilience, hope, and the belief that circumstances don't define destiny. Because she'd learned these lessons the hard way, standing in the heat with flowers, counting coins by lamplight, studying while others slept. And now it was her turn to pass those lessons on, to be for others what Mrs. Khalida had been for her. The circle of kindness continues, unbroken, as long as there are people willing to stop and see each other. As long as there are people who remember their own struggles and use them not as excuses, but as motivation to help others struggling too. As long as we choose every single day to be the ones who notice, who care, who act, Amina had become that person. And in doing so, she'd proven that the little girl who once sold flowers to pay her school fees had been right all along. Dreams don't die. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them, to water them with kindness, to give them the light of opportunity. And then they bloom, more beautiful than anyone could have imagined, spreading seeds that grow into more dreams, more hope, more stories of transformation that remind us all what's possible when we refuse to walk past each other's struggles. This is how the world changes, not all at once, but one stopped moment at a time, one act of kindness at a time. One person seeing another and choosing to help, one person at a time.